Cool.
Off you go.
Thank you very much. Cool. Hi guys. Thanks for the intro. Just a little bit more background of where I'm from. So you're like, why am I here talking to you? I have been working in sustainability and now what's termed livability for about the last 17 years. I actually went through the first environmental management sustainability degree in Australia, and I've worked in local government, I've worked in state government, I've worked in corporate world. I worked at Coca-Cola for quite some years and now work at Sydney Water in this area. So I've seen the transition of corporate social responsibility or environmental management go from everything that companies employed somebody who was a little bit left field, got them to do a few things here and there that paid back for themselves and kind of, put it on the front page of their annual report and kind of glossed over it, all the way through to sustainability becoming a core business as a part of what organisations do and they must do to survive into the future, right the way through to now. And what I focus on at Sydney Water is about enhancing the livability of the cities that we live in, which, you hear this term livability all the time and people throw it around, but for me it's almost like customer facing or community facing sustainability. It's about what people value and how does an organisation show that, they're not only just here to sell product or to make money and to do their business, but what things are they doing that creates that value link with the community. You might have heard the term creating shared value that gets thrown around at the moment, and it's probably that next evolution of sustainability where it's really about how organisations are finding that link, between what it is that they do and the communities that they serve or the communities that they sell to. And that's really what I'm here to talk about and just to give you a little bit of examples. But if you've got questions or anything that pop up along the way, please yell out. I've been at work all day talking to people non-stop today, so give me a break, and I'm more than happy for you guys to sing out. So just to have a little bit of a focus on Sydney Water, before I skip on, we've embarked on a new strategy. It's about 12 months old for the organisation, and it's about what Sydney Water can do, and we call it to enable vibrant communities, neighbourhoods and cities. So it's what work can a large organisation, state-owned corporation do, not only just about water and wastewater services, making sure that people pay their bills and we actually run as a corporation, but what can we do at a neighbourhood level, what can we do at a community level, and what can we do at a city level to actually make Sydney a better place to live for the people who are here now and also for the future of people that are going to live in Sydney. So we've coined this under the whole livability movement that you'll probably hear out. I mean, who's heard of, Australia's most livable city is Adelaide? Have you heard of the World Happiness Index? Heard of Australia's least livable city? Anyone know? Darwin? But those sorts of things that you hear, those sort of ratings, they take into account all the stuff that you usually see under corporate social responsibility, all the environmental factors, but they also then take into the community side of it, the happiness, the enjoyment and the fulfilment that people have when they live there. And there's about 17,000 articles written on what livability is, and I needed to come up with a really simple phrase for the organisation. So it's everything that makes a city enjoyable to live in. Right? And that's it in a nutshell. It goes from good transport networks to water and wastewater systems. It goes to places being aesthetically appealing. It's whether people feel like they actually belong, whether they feel that they have a cultural link to the city and the area that they live in. It ranges from everything that makes a city attract people to want to live there and keep them there happily. Now what that means though is that what rank you put those things in depends on your gender, depends on what stage of life that you're in. Like if you're married with little kids, and you're paying $500,000 mortgage, you're going to tend to focus on those things that are more around the basic needs. But if you're single, living the high life, living in Sydney, you generally tend to want those extra things. You want your city to be investing in renewable energy. You want your city to be looking at new ways of, making sure that it keeps the place livable for in the future. So in terms of what we're doing, if we think about that in terms of everything that makes a city enjoyable to live in, one thing that's become really, really clear from all of that sort of stuff is that water is at the absolute centre of almost everything that makes a city enjoyable to live in. I'm waiting for someone to challenge me. Right? You can challenge me. But if you think about what makes a city enjoyable to live in, people have jobs. Can you work in the commercial tower down the road if you don't have quality water and waste and sanitation services? The second the water stops supplied, they'll evacuate the building like there's a big shock. So water keeps businesses going, keeps the productivity going, keeps people employed. If you can't provide people with beautiful surroundings, beaches to go at, parks to walk around, they're all things that contribute to making a city livable. You've got the other intangible things that we're starting to think about as an organisation, is it places where the urban heat island effect is going to become extreme in the next 20 or 30 years. What's water's role in keeping green space alive, or actually providing open channel waterways to allow passive cooling of those areas to negate the urban heat island effect? So for us as a business, when you talk about what Sydney Water's thinking, we're thinking about the role water plays in not only the future of sustainable Sydney, but also the future of the communities and livable Sydney. So we've really taken this focus on I like to say all the time at work, we've got to stop being plumbers and now we're going to start being planners. We're fantastic plumbers. We're great at providing water and wastewater services, but water has a higher value to the city and to its people, and we need to start thinking about that higher value. And one of the reasons why we need to think about that higher value is that I'm not sure how many of you know that the stats that are coming out about the future of Sydney. All the growth that's happening in Sydney, you just have to walk around to see all the extra buildings that are happening, but there is the equivalent of a Canberra going in our northwest and the equivalent of a Canberra going in our southwest. Okay? If you think about the things that are going to impact on our city, in the next 20 years, we're going to have over another 1 million people living in Sydney, and most of that's going to be in the city. We're going to have a whole bunch of more urban densification, more people, more housing, all that type of thing. Over the next 20 years, to have an extra 1 million people here, we're going to have 625,000 new jobs, 500,000 more homes. So we're looking at a Sydney Sydney and its surrounding cities that is growing at a rapid rate, and that we need to start doing things now that ensure that Sydney still attracts business, still attracts people in the future, but is also still doesn't lose the parts of Sydney that make people want to live here. The beautiful surroundings, water and wastewater services, the great parks, the natural built environments, the fantastic different representative of cultures that we have in this city. We don't want to lose any of that. We want to add to that. And water actually has a role in all of that. Some other things that are really facing our city in the next 20 years is long-term water security. Yes, we do have a desalination plant. There are a whole lot of recycled water plants in operation. But next prediction of when our population will outgrow our water stores is somewhere between 2030 and 2065. So that's desal flat out, dams full, running, everything. Our population will outgrow our water supplies then, and we will need another source of water. So long-term water security is an issue. And also climate change, just a big one that everyone likes to tuck under the rug at the moment. But in a city where you're going to have increasing extreme weather events, you're going to have in an area where you've got increased urban densification, you're going to have increased urban heat island effects. You've got a whole bunch of challenges that are going to be facing a city, and we're now looking at how, through being the, water custodian in Sydney Water, we can fix those things. Anyone want to challenge anything? Freaked out? Anybody know that stuff? No? Okay, so in terms of what we're doing at Sydney Water, we're really talking about things that we can do now and things that we do now that impact on the future. And then we're also talking about a mindset to actually make these things occur, because this is quite a change. Sydney's going to see growth in the next 20 years that it hasn't seen for a very long time. We're going to be dealing with things that we haven't ever dealt with before. So what we're trying to do through our work is demonstrate how we can enhance the livability of our cities now and in the future, but also we've got to make sure that as an organisation we go through a bit of a cultural change to have some mindsets to enable this work to happen. So our mindsets are about connect, collaborate and innovate. That connect bit, that really links back to that value that I was talking about before. The connecting is connecting with our customers. How are we going to do things that our customers value? How do we show that the work that we're doing, the money that we're investing, is actually worthwhile for the people that we serve? And that's a really important thing in terms of all organisations at the moment. Doesn't matter which one you're talking about, whether you're talking about Coca-Cola or Westpac or Barangaroo, every organisation that I'm aware of in terms of their corporate social responsibility is looking for that shared value link with the community. They're looking about not only saying, oh, look at us, aren't we great? We've got procurement chain models. We made sure that we only use anybody that's ISO 14001 accredited. You know, we make sure we produce 20% of our own renewable energy. You know, we recycle 95% of all the waste that we produce. Organisations are maturing past that, and it's about that outward-looking, that customer-facing approach that people are now taking to say, how do we demonstrate that what we're doing is adding value to the community? And you'll see, I don't know how many of you keep an eye on what's out there in the job market, but the increase that I have seen in the last 12 months over environmental management, sustainability jobs, or health, safety and environment jobs is what it always used to be, through to community outcome managers or, you know, social responsibility managers. So it's really taking that shift now through to that shared value with communities, which for me is a really interesting, a really interesting evolution of the last 17 years to see how sustainability has gotten hold of in organisations and has started to morph into community businesses thinking about the future of the communities in which they work. And it's not, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not all just because they want to be, you know, good organisations. It's where they actually see they're going to continue to generate profits and income. Because without the communities around, without the people, happily living in those areas, without people feeling an actual link to the products that they're buying or the company that they're buying from, the companies won't get that continual increase in profit. So yes, there's a part of it that's, you know, altruistic, as in looking towards the future for, I guess, the cities, but a lot of it is a competitive advantage. It's about how do you continue to grow profitability in an organisation. So in just terms of our, went off on a bit of a tangent, in terms of our themes, in terms of what we're doing about connecting with our customers, really interestingly, we just did some research, actually one-on-one, but a bit of qualitative and quantitative research, asking people in Sydney, because it's never been done, you know, just for Sydney and Illawarra and the Blue Mountains, what does livability mean to you? And we got all these things back. And it was, you know, people were saying transport, jobs, you know, healthy waterways, aesthetic appealing, you know, good cultural networks. I want to feel part of the city. You know, I want to feel like I belong here. I want to have pride. And people were saying that across all of Sydney. You know, out west, down south, everywhere. But as I alluded to before, the order they were putting the priority on these things was different. And it had a lot to do with geographically where they live and where they are in their life. I often get in trouble at work for saying the same reason that I choose to live in the inner west of Sydney is the same reason a lot of people choose not to live there. But that's just how we rate what makes that place livable. So what we're finding in our customers is that that's what they think about livability. But in terms of water, and this was really interesting, in terms of water, the expectations was the same from everyone. They think that a good water company and other companies should be investing in community outcomes, showing how they link to the well-being of their customers today and how they link to their well-being of their customers in the future. So for me, there's a real advantage for Sydney Water in terms of a competitive advantage because of the scale of our business to tap into those types of outcomes. Next one is about collaborating, and this is really simple from a business perspective. Everybody at the moment is working in an environment of really frugal fiscal control. Everybody at the moment is still downsizing. Everybody is trying to do more with less. The smartest business things you can do to get things done is collaborating with other people that are in the space that you want to get in, because you're basically combining resources, people and money, and trying to create better outcomes. But the really important thing about, in terms of corporate social responsibility and livability, is that a lot of the things that you're trying to achieve when you look at providing value to the community, you can't do just on your own. You know, if we were to try to do all of this just as a water company, we would fail, because things go outside our jurisdictional boundaries and all these types of things. But if we collaborate with other agencies, for example, give you an example of things that we've got on the go at the moment. We own a lot of assets, and we own a lot of land corridors all around Greater Sydney, where we've taken easements over the land because you have to protect the asset under the ground. They are absolutely perfect for bike tracks, urban gardens, a whole bunch of other community outcomes. We're working with a bunch of councils at the moment about connecting up these land corridors and providing places for people to walk around. You know, what if we connected that one up with someone that's owned by the council here, and this bit that's owned by the Roads and Traffic Authority over here, and all of a sudden, instead of having this one short 100-metre track, you've got this beautiful, walkway that each organisation has invested in that provides a community benefit. So that's what I mean about collaborating, where everybody, if you can actually get in the room with people who are trying to achieve the same thing, there's really fantastic opportunities to make stuff happen. Innovation is a core part of what any organisation should do, but for us, in terms of our CSR, it's about always looking for new ways to provide our products and services. So that means long gone are the days where you build a wastewater treatment plant that is built with 50 years capacity in it, and put out in the middle of nowhere, and you build miles and miles and miles of pipes to get there. That is an exceptionally expensive way to treat wastewater. We've got to be looking at what's the future. The future in Europe, around the world, is decentralised systems. So we're looking at how can we actually, it's like a little model kit car. If there's going to be all this growth in the northwest and southwest, can we have little tiny decentralised systems and make them work for those communities, because they cost less in the first place? So we're actually returning better value to our customers, but then they provide you with an opportunity to link things up when the growth comes. So it's exactly opposite to build it and we will come. It's about building what's the exact fit for that community at the time, because it's a better fit for the community at the time. In terms of the work that we're doing, you can kind of group the work that we do under 4 headings. And interestingly enough, I have accountability for the overall strategy, but I also have the same job title as one of the programs. I think that's what happens when they let you come up with your own job title. But in terms of the work that we're doing, so you can get a feel for how straight sustainability, environmental management is transforming into that community shared value space, is that in terms of the people and places, we're looking at creating shared places for people to enjoy. And that's perfectly linked to the idea of giving spaces to bring people together, because human beings are social creatures. And it's really, really important to create those spaces to bring people together, give them an outlet. Interestingly, there's some research during the last drought, in the Millennium Drought from about 98 to 2010, a lot of all watering on open playing fields was banned. You've probably heard about lots of, the kids' football couldn't take place on Saturday mornings and all that sort of things. And everyone's like, kids can't play footy, what's the big difference? The big difference was that it wasn't just the kids that got value out of that, it was the parents that took them. They got an opportunity to talk to each other. They got an opportunity to talk about the week that they'd had, download all the stuff that had happened, and form this community connection that actually, really linked them to that area. So there's some really interesting research that's coming out that if you take away open space from those areas that happened during the Millennium Drought, that domestic violence, gambling, poker use goes through the roof. So there's this link between corporate social responsibility, sustainability, customer-focused sustainability, livability. It's like the whole human aspect to it. So it's not just now about things we're doing to protect the environment, it's things that we're doing that respond to us as human beings and the environment that we live in. Some of the other stuff that we're doing is around, promoting the importance of water in enhancing livability. Very sadly, I work for an organisation that if you ask people who live in Sydney, 25% of people don't know what we do. 50% of people don't think that we have anything to do with wastewater. That's life at the moment. What we have to do is create a value around that water, and that's come about for a reason. I mean, historically, water and wastewater services in in Sydney, we had to provide them and be silent about them. The less people knew we were there, the better we were doing our jobs. You can see that we've got this massive value proposition missing. People have learnt not to value the product that we provide. In talking to our customers, any person who has lived overseas or travelled extensively overseas values the quality of the water in Sydney above everybody else, but people who have only lived here don't value it at all. That's a big challenge for us, because seeing that a city's productivity, its sustainability, and its community connection all revolves around water, we have to be promoting different ways and promoting how water plays a role and creating a value around it, especially given that we're going to need a new water source in about 30 to 50 years. Just an aside, another interesting thing we're doing is about celebrating our history. It's about connecting people to the history of the city. And one thing that's absolutely astounded me is that the increase in inquiries into the heritage of the city has quadrupled in the last 4 years, and it's all by the under 25s. So everyone's like, it's all people retiring and they want to know about it. The interest in the histories of cities is all coming from the under 25s. And I have an archaeologist at work who looks like Indiana Jones, and she just gave a presentation on heritage, hashtags, and something else, social media, that I didn't properly understand. And the feedback that she got was insane, and the people in the room were all under 30. It was incredible. So it's just it's about knowing these trends are happening, and it's just an interesting aside. The other thing that we're doing in one of our programs is land and waterways. And you can see by this is where you get into the really, the environmental type part of livability. When we're talking about, water sensitive urban design, we're talking about clean beaches. We're talking about, making sure that cities don't flood. We're talking about, making sure that we could look at water sources, we can look at rainwater, we can look at potable water, we can look at recycled water, we can look at sewer mined water, we'll look at recycled water and go, okay, what is the best fit for this community? How do we make the best mix? Because the best mix is certainly not what happens in cities at the moment. And given the fact that we basically are the custodians of the urban water cycle at Sydney Water, we need to be helping people make those decisions. We need to be working with councils and helping other government departments make those decisions. It's really interesting. The one thing that always gets me about this is that how many people don't make the link between Sydney Water and clean beaches. It absolutely astounds me, so we've got another value proposition to work on. Just go quickly over the other two programs that we've got. And there's a whole bunch of stuff about growth and servicing, and it's about continuing to provide clean drinking water and sanitation services, because without that, the whole city would fall down in an instant. And that's not just people who would, drop dead with cholera quite quickly, but it's also the receiving waters, the environments, the beaches, the habitats, the estuaries, everything would crumble quite quickly. So what we have to do is make sure that we continue to do that. I was doing some research the other day and was looking at the growth that happened in Surrey Hills when Surrey Hills was first developed, and the growth happened so quickly that it happened without water and wastewater service. I'm not sure how many people know that Surrey Hills was a complete slum, absolutely overtaken with waterborne diseases because the growth happened too quickly. So, and that's not that long ago. That's 150 years ago. That's not that long ago. Some other things that we're doing are about keeping the city affordable, making sure that we keep our products affordable. And that's really about that community value, finding new ways of doing our stuff so we can keep our work affordable. And there's a bunch of other stuff about, we're trying to figure out how to best keep up with this rapid growth that's happening. As an interesting aside, most of the land that hasn't been developed in urban Sydney hasn't been developed because it floods. So that historically, the land is vacant because the value on that land has been decided that when a flood happens, that land will flood. By that land flooding, it'll protect the surrounding houses, the surrounding businesses, protect the health of people, protect the safety of people, protect what people own. Now, with that land becoming paramount for people to live, because we're getting so many more people here, if we're going to build in those areas, we're going to have all this floodwater and have to figure out what to do with it. So when you're talking about corporate social responsibility, do you build a big pipe and get it out to the ocean as quickly as possible? Or do you see the water as a resource and try and do something with it? Our last thing that we do is really, really focused on the future of the city, and it's not only the future of the city for our customers and for us to, but it's also for us to stay sustainable as a business. And our City of Futures program really talks about building our resilience to climate change. We have a lot of assets, especially down in Wollongong, that are in low coastal areas that, with climate change, will be underwater in 30, 40 years' time from now. So concrete pipes that were built to sit above seawater don't last as long when you suddenly immerse them in seawater. So we've got to start thinking about how do we wait till that happens and then get caught in a situation where it's going to cost the community billions? Or do we actually start planning and mitigating some of those impacts of climate change now? We also are looking at driving efficient uses of producing our own renewable energy through the typical things like hydro and solar. But for me, most excitingly, we're looking at how can we generate energy from the waste produced by a community to power our own plants first, but then to power the communities. So we've got a couple of treatment plants that produce between 70 and 80% of their own energy to power those treatment plants from the sewer that comes in. And now we're looking at supercharging a few of our co-digesters to look at, well, could we look at in 20 years' time from now that instead of having sewage treatment plants, we actually have energy generation plants, and they produce the energy to power that plant and the surrounding neighbourhoods and communities and cities. It's absolutely a reality, and it happens all through Europe at the moment, and we will have a completely energy neutral treatment plant by about halfway through next year. So that stuff's absolutely happening, but it's not only about the future of the city and providing value to our customers, but how smart for us. That's a waste product for us. We have to treat it and pump it out into the ocean. So we can harness the energy that's in wastewater, because there's 4 times more energy in it than it takes to treat it, then we should be doing something really, really valuable with it. You okay? Cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to be boring. Some of the other stuff I've already talked about finding new ways to do the things that we're doing. So, oops, I pushed the wrong button. That's okay. So from that, it kind of gives you a little bit of a flavour from a Sydney Water perspective of how we're taking corporate social responsibility, taking it to the next level. Because we've had environment plans and environment targets for years and years and years. We do that. We make sure that we only work with contractors that have, fantastic environmental credentials. We recycle our own stuff. We do proper chemical management. That's my influence, sorry. I took them all to the pub before. And we've done all of that. But what we're finding is that that's not even close to meeting customer expectations anymore. That's not even close to customers seeing our brand and going, hey, that's a fantastic brand. I value that brand not only for what they do, but the role that they play in a community. So that's what we're trying to do. Make sense? Cool, come work with me. Any questions?
You were talking about the quality of the water Australia, and what is the difference between the quality here, or what would you say is the difference between quality here and somewhere else in Australia?
In Australia, in Sydney, we have probably one of the highest quality potable waters in the world. Some of the biggest differences. I mean, all Australian cities have got fantastic water supply, but I'm from Adelaide, and I can tell you that the water in Adelaide tastes salty as. So I'm going to leave it there, salty as, because if you look at where all the water comes from, you know, you've got Queensland and Brisbane taking out a lot of water for irrigation, continues to come down, you know, aquifers, Murray-Darling Basin continues to come down, Sydney takes a whole bunch more out. All right, continues to get down. By the time it gets through to Adelaide, through the Murray-Darling, so much water has been taken out that there's just really salty stuff left. And salt is the hardest thing to get out of water. So in places where there's issues with water supplies, like Adelaide, in 50 years' time from now, Adelaide's going to have a huge problem with the salt content of their water and meeting public health standards every day. And it's hard because it's a water source problem, but it's a source problem that's all of Australia. So it's really odd that Australia, in my opinion, doesn't have an overarching body that looks after water at a national level. It's left up to the states to fight between each other. But people who live in Sydney, just turn on the tap and go, isn't that great? You know, there's no value associated with how fortunate I am to live in a city where I can just turn on the tap and drink the water.
As you say, so like, you know, we take some of the water from Murray-Darling. Do you have to, and when it flows to South Australia, it's really salty then? Is that another factor you have to take into consideration, like how much water you take from the Murray-Darling?
In a rural sense, absolutely. I mean, all of our water comes from a couple of different dams, but when you're talking about rural water supplies, it's the rural ones that are basically tapped along, the ones that are on the Murray-Darling, and that's why they brought in that water trading, which I don't know that much about, but it was like, oh, you can only take out this much, and you've got a licence, and then farmers were trading those licences, but from what I know, that hasn't worked very effectively. And it hasn't worked because there's no overarching coordination. It's just the states fighting amongst themselves, and you know, if you were a premier of one state, you'd defend the people in your state over the others. You just would. That's human. That's what humans do.
Is the culture that you're telling us strong internally, and if so, like how long do you think before it flows, like your plans flow
through? The culture inside Sydney Water, the people who work there feel really strongly across the board about what we do, providing a really valued community service. But the one thing that is always a challenge in an organisation is that we have come from a history of being a fantastic engineering firm. Any engineers in the room? Excellent, I can speak freely. No, and because we come from an engineering firm, an engineering basis, there is this idea that if there's a problem, the best thing you can do is build a pipe, build a pump, you know, engineer the solution out. To give you an example of that, things that are happening in the UK at the moment with the water authorities is that with a lot of the wastewater treatment plants, if you're discharging into a river, you've got really strict controls on the nutrients that you can put in that river. So when growth happens upstream and then you can no longer treat the nutrients in that plant, the old-fashioned engineering solution says, upgrade your plant. Spend millions and millions of dollars on upgrading your plant. Whereas, I guess the more holistic solution and what I'm advocating at Sydney Water is, well, have you looked at where your sources of nutrients are coming from? And in the UK, they've got a fantastic example of they could have spent somewhere around $30 million or something on upgrading a treatment plant, but then they had a look at it and their sources of nutrients were coming from 3 farms. So they spent considerably less money going and working with those farmers to change their practices or to actually help those farmers pay for some changes at the farm so they didn't have to upgrade the treatment plant. So it's a different way of thinking. So the community value piece is strong. The working out different ways to do what we do is going to take me longer in the organisation. There's a group of us working on this, and the best thing that we can do is get a few runs on the board and show people. But I think it's a real organisational change, like a 5 to 10 year thing to make it happen. But it's not just us that we have to bring along; it's the regulators who set the rules for us and everybody. So it's really about a change for the future of Sydney. But when I talk to people about the strong community link, that resonates. So that's the in. Hello.
That example from the UK, that's the example for creating shared value, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and from that example, it seems rather easy to put a number, a dollar number on, how much shared value is being created. Is that always easy? And if so, how do you measure shared value and the creation of shared value?
Yeah, it's one of the. I don't have the answer to that. It's the biggest challenge that we've got at the moment. It's like people say, economists love to talk about, well, we'll do an economic framework and we'll capture the externalities, right? Which I think is one of the biggest wank words I've ever heard in my life, about externalities. And they use that as a frame to say, well, what's the environment benefit and the social benefit and plus or minus things. But sometimes there's just no way of getting a dollar value around what you're doing. If you create an area, and it's a constant struggle, because to get some projects over the line, you have to create that. So people are being pretty clever. So in terms of the last heat wave that went through Melbourne, a lot of my colleagues in Melbourne Water quickly did all of these stats with the health department down there, and they figured out that during the heat wave that went through in 7 days, they had 640 more admissions to hospital because of that heat wave. So then they quickly measured, well, in the city, this was the average increase in temperature because of all the urbanisation. This is what it would have been, had they been looking at creating green space. So they did some really quick calculations of, well, they know how much it costs to admit someone to hospital. They know all that's how much to treat them. So they did some quick calculations around, well, if we'd invested in green space and we could have kept the temperature down by a degree, then that would have saved this amount of dollars. But it's very then hard to quantify how much it costs to get the temperature down by a degree. So it's a constantly evolving battle for people that work in this area.
So when you propose projects or initiatives that create shared value, and you're getting into calculating benefits in a way, what is getting projects over the line, and what is being supported by Sydney Water and partners, or cities and councils, and what is not?
The things that the standard economic models that you use, the triple bottom line stuff, the standard economic models will get you to some point. But the thing that is getting over the line is the strategic advantage associated with the community value, the customer focus. So even projects that are tight for me, like very tight line ball, whether they would go ahead, if I can demonstrate through research, talking to our customers, as there's a general broad appeal, that this will increase the way our customers see us, will increase our value proposition, then that's getting them over the line at the moment. So all of that research that we just did about finding was to come up with the 8 things across the board that our customers value above anything else. And what I've done then is linked that back to some value proposition work that was done. So it's not economics, it's about how do customers value products. Most organisations will do it. There'll be a value around service, there'll be a value around the product, and there'll be a value around, the caring for customer value. And you can break it up into different parts. So I've made a link between our value proposition to our customers and the work that we're doing under the strategic framework of the organisation, which is about delivering customer value. So it's almost, I've turned the economics on its head and say, well, this might not pay for itself, but strategically it's going to get us a bang for our buck in the customer value proposition area. And it's very the economists want to chase me all the time around work, but you have to be persistent. You have to keep trying these things. And if we do our next survey results and I'm wrong and there's no increase, I'm pretty sure I have someone to answer to. But that's cool. That's a part of working in. You're never going to get everything right, and sometimes you have to make decisions before you've got all the answers. we're looking at the moment trying to get a project off the ground to build a decentralised wastewater treatment plant in one of the growth areas. All the economics will tell you that doing it this way is more expensive than doing it the traditional way, because we've got a treatment plant down the road. But we don't really know the economics of doing it in a decentralised way. It's all pretend numbers. We've never actually done it before. So we're trying to actually take a risk and say, well, let us do it. Let us show you, let us try, work out how much it costs. Then we'll actually look at the other community benefits that we've got out of it, and we'll try and put value around those things to demonstrate. And it might fail. It might. But it also might give us an insight. There's a totally different way we could be doing our things. And all of this work comes with a level of risk appetite. It's about knowing which bits to lever. But anything you can do that links into the corporate strategic direction, and anything that you can do that links into that, the community value, at the moment seems to be getting the easiest win for me.
You're no longer operating in a monopoly.
Yes.
So, what's competition, and what's competition doing in this sort of?
In this?
What can they actually do? Because the competition is has nowhere near the opportunity that Sydney Water would have.
Yeah. So our competition at the moment exists in a number of areas. So the Central Park development, the water and wastewater provider is a company called Flow Systems. Barangaroo will have another wastewater, and we've got another one at Bingara Gorge. For us, because we have that greater community impact, I guess our competitive advantage that we see through this is those broader community outcomes. At Central Park, unless you can afford to buy the unit in there, and you can afford that, you're not actually getting any benefit from the company that provides those water and wastewater services. So it's a really fixed market. For us, we're purposely targeting that broader community outcome. That's why there's a real flavour on neighbourhoods and communities and now and into the future about what we're doing, because we're trying to pitch ourselves as the organisation that can provide those broader outcomes. So if you want to go buy a unit at Barangaroo, good luck to you. You won't be, the services that you'll get in there will be very limited just to that area. But if you come out of there and go to a community park or go to a local waterway or go to the beach, then that's when you're reaping the benefits of the Sydney Water. So for us, competition will be very new for us as an organisation, but we're very preparing for it constantly. And I guess this whole strategy was generated from, business analysis and what are our big risks coming up, and what do we need to do to show that we're valued by our community and delivering the things that our customers want. And and if we didn't do this, we wouldn't be doing what our customers want.
But doing what you're doing and engaging in these initiatives also means that you're almost creating something else to compete over. So you could take your capacity other places and do the same. Engaging with communities, creating shared values, and improving the water quality. But it almost becomes secondary to the first thing.
Yep. Yeah, and that's that gets talked about a little bit in the organisation, about taking all the IP and the nous and the knowledge that we have and applying it elsewhere. The organisation probably isn't mature enough yet to go down that path. There was a Sydney Water consulting arm probably about 10 years ago, but it was quite interesting because from what I know about it, and I wasn't involved, is that most of the work that we did was for overseas, and Sydney Water had a policy of not in any way paying or taking bribes, and we were working in countries where that was the way that things got done. So our business failed miserably because we applied the standards in Australia to outside, so it was quite entertaining.
With smaller providers being around, how do you align the goals of your plans with theirs? So if there's small ones for Central Park and Barangaroo, city, how can you align those goals? If, say, there's a more profit.
Because we're a direct competitor?
Yeah, if you're competitors, and say theirs is more profit-driven because they're smaller and yours is more sustainable, how can you align those goals on a greater city level?
Yeah. It's when you're dealing with direct competitors, so my experience at Coke is completely different to my experience at Sydney Water. Whereas I sit on a local water reference group that has the CEO of Flow Systems, another guy, the CEO of Permeate Partners, and another guy, and we sit in there with ISF, and we talk about what are the policy and regulatory challenges to the water industry, and we try and overcome them together. Because I guess what we're saying is, by Sydney Water positioning as a greater community outcome, we're making space for those smaller players, but we want them all to be a part of making Sydney better. So at the end of the day, I mean, the building in the development in Central Park is beautiful, and they recycle 95% of all the wastewater that comes out of there. They've got and they're pitching at a sustainable edge. So at the moment, our business strategies align. But it's really intriguing. Most people, when I was working at Coke, if I had a meeting with somebody at Pepsi, I would have got fired. Yeah, I'm more, yet I'm allowed time and energy and effort to work side by side with Flow Systems and Permeate Partners to try and actually look at what are the challenges for us. Because at the end of the day, I think the truth is we all want to get some better regulation in the water industry, because at the moment the regulation somewhat stymies the innovation, because you can't look at potable water and stormwater and recycled water on an even playing field. Bye. Thanks, guys. How do I turn this off?
You cannot.
Oh, okay.
Record the rest.